So last night I was sitting down and listening to an interview, and I came across a doctor who spent a lot of time in China, and he works with energy. And he introduced to me a new distinction around overwhelm that I want to share with you. Now, this is something I knew, but the way he explained it absolutely made sense, and it just helps us understand why we have overwhelm, why we have fears, why we have anxiety, why we experience challenging times in our lives, what the purpose of it is, and how we can deal with it. So I want to share this information with you because I believe it is extremely helpful, and it helped me just have a little bit of an insight having this distinction, because I've been battling with a number of times with having repeat issues, the same things happening over and over, the same challenges, recycled challenges. And I've been wondering, what the hell's going on? Why are the same things showing up in my reality? And I've been in search of the information, and perhaps you're looking for the same thing. You're wondering, why do I have the same relationship problems? Why do I have the same money challenges? Why do I have the same work challenges, the same challenges with certain kinds of people? So this distinction helped me to understand a little bit better so I can accept responsibility and move myself to a high level of order and a high level of personal performance. So a distinction basically helps you, you can understand something, you can have the knowledge about something, but it's still not going to make a difference in your life. You may have all the knowledge about a particular topic, but it's not going to make a difference. I learned about distinctions when I was studying coaching, and basically you can study all the manuals about riding a bicycle, you can have all the information about riding a bicycle, you can have everything that, all the information, read up on every single book on the most professional cyclists, but is that going to enable you to ride a bicycle? Not necessarily, because you've got to actually get on the bike and learn to balance. And that is what's going to make the difference and give you the opportunity to ride a bicycle. So, with that in mind, what is the distinction that we can use regarding overwhelm? When we have overwhelm, when we have stress in our lives, when we have anxieties, when we have things, pressures from the outside world, when all this is going on, how can we deal with it? Well, we deal with it with a number of ways at the moment. You might decide, these pressures, anxieties, overwhelms, they might trigger your adrenal system, and you want to use your energy and go and work it out, find a solution, which is great. That's one way to deal with it. Another way you might deal with it is you want to avoid it. You run away from it, you want to avoid it, you go and sleep, you don't want to look at it until it goes away on its own. But does it go away? See, when we fight something and try to push it away from our lives, it kind of finds us again. When we avoid something and try to hide away, use the ostrich approach, a number of people do this with money. They do the ostrich approach and avoid it. It's still the same issue comes and haunts you, if not now, a little later on. So you have recycled problems. So consider this. If you have when you go out there is weather. It might be cold weather. It's snowing outside. And you start complaining about the weather. You go out there and you swear at the weather. You complain about the weather. You want it to change. Is it going to change? No. The same thing if it's a really hot day. Is it going to make a difference if you go out there and you start complaining that it's hot, and you try to do all these things to avoid the heat, or try to make it away? Is it going to change the fact that it's hot? No, it's not going to make a change. So the one thing we need to learn is to deal with things that happen. We need to learn to deal with the weather. We need to learn to deal with the challenges that we have. We need to learn to deal with the problems that come into our lives. There's a reason why they're there. The same thing with gravity. We have gravity, it's there, we can't avoid it. If if you raise your hands, eventually they're going to get tired and you're going to need to rest them. You're going to need to put them down. If you jump off a building, you're going to fall and you're going to very likely get hurt. So these are things that exist in life. They're a bigger part of who we are, and we need to learn to deal with them. The same overwhelm, anxiety, fear. These things are principles, traits that exist, and when we're getting overwhelmed, you might have your partner overwhelming you. You might have business overwhelming you. You might have money overwhelming you. You might have yourself and your own thoughts overwhelming you. You might have all the things you got to do on a daily basis overwhelming you. But unless you learn to deal with it, you're going to consistently have overwhelm in your life, and you're not going to know how to deal with it. So we develop strategies to deal with these things. But it doesn't take us to the core of actually learning to work with the overwhelm so that it doesn't concern us and doesn't bother us on the inside. Because you might still have all these strategies to deal with anxiety and overwhelm and have all these tools and a bunch of toolkits that have invented. You might read all the books about dealing with overwhelm. But unless you have the distinction that overwhelm is there to help you, overwhelm is there to teach you to become better, to improve yourself, to learn something out of. You're going to constantly want to avoid overwhelm. When overwhelm comes, it's going to trigger your nervous system. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to feel under pressure. You're going to have all these feelings. And that's not going to help you actually deal with the overwhelm. What's going to help you deal with the overwhelm is to have the distinction that it's there for a purpose, and your reason, your mission is to learn to better deal with it. So how can we deal with overwhelm and anxiety and fears and all the stuff that comes our way? How can we deal with it better? The first thing you want to do is understand that it's there for a reason. It's there to serve you. It's not going to go away, just like the weather doesn't go away, just like the gravity doesn't disappear. It's there. It's part of the world that we live in. Overwhelm, anxiety, stress, fear. It's always been there. It was always existed before you arrived on this planet. It's always going to exist after you leave this planet. It's always going to exist. As a matter of fact, now we have social media and all these ways that we're bombarded with information, and we feel like, oh, we can't handle it because we're overwhelmed by all this information that we have. Well, did you know that in the 1980s, in the early 80s, there were statistics and facts and information saying that there's so much information out there, it's overwhelming us. Already back then, in the early 80s. So now we just have different levels of overwhelm. We have higher degrees of overwhelm that we need to learn to deal with. Now, this was quite liberating for me, because now I don't have to avoid overwhelm. I don't need to hide away from it. I can say, well, there's actually a lesson for me here. There's something, that the fact that there is a repeat pattern that I'm not seeing, that I'm not able to break through. I need to learn what there is to learn so I can break through and not have to deal with the same kind of pattern again. So I don't have to deal with this overwhelm on this same level ever again. I can once and for all learn to move beyond the overwhelm, to go past the overwhelm, so that it doesn't affect me physically, emotionally, mentally, as it does when I'm not being conscious and aware of it. So those are the things you need to do. First of all, understand the distinction that it's there, it's going to stay, it's not going away. You're always going to have overwhelm, you're always going to have stress, you're always going to have this kind of stuff showing up in your life. Your job is to learn to deal with it. Not by having 50, 1,000 different tools to deal with it, but to learn to deal with it internally. And how you're going to do that is one of the steps is to create a meditative mind, to relax your mind, to slow your mind down and look at it objectively, look at it from the outside. And then the moment you're looking at it objectively and seeing, okay, what is this thing trying to tell me? How can I work through this? How can I rise above the issue that's going on? It's not going to trigger your nervous system anymore. You're going to step outside the emotional triggers that you're having, and you're going to step outside the mental triggers also, and you're going to be able to see it with an objective mind. And with that objective mind, you're going to be able to deal with it, rise above it, and next time when it comes, you're able to much easier deal with that thing. So that's the message I have for you today. I hope it is helpful. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? How have you experienced overwhelm in your life? How has it shown up for you in your life, and how have you dealt with it? And is this distinction going to help you, and how's it going to help you personally? I'd love to know. Let me know how it goes.